To welcome our speaker, Dr. Warren Ferrell. First of all, the name of his talk is Why the Boy Crisis Resides Where Dads Do Not Reside. And Dr. Ferrell has been chosen by Financial Times as one of the world's top 100 thought leaders. His books are published in over 15 countries and 19 languages.
Yes. I began to see that boys in all 63 of the largest developed nations were falling behind girls in every single academic subject, and especially in reading and writing, no, it's not a surprise to most people that reading and writing are the two biggest predictors academically of success or failure. The biggest predictor of success or failure in life is postponed gratification. It's beginning to see that the addiction to both sexes play video games, but addiction to video games is far more common among boys.
Do you know why that is? The video game addiction. Because that is a topic that parents talk about a lot.
We did see even more of it from COVID, but even before COVID, the male propensity to play 15 hours or more of video games per week was much greater among boys than girls. And one of the things that is really important to avert video game addiction is doing things with boys. Boys who are playing basketball or playing with their father, roughhousing, going out camping, having challenges, being played with and teased and connected and develop important bonds. Those help to avert video game addiction. As you know, Mark, there was a young man in my life. There was a young man who wrote me about 6-8 months ago, saying that he had been addicted to video games and he didn't have a father, and he was living with his mother, and he got into a great deal of hostility with his mother. His mother couldn't handle him anymore. The mother passed him on to a grandmother and then aunts, none of whom had men in their lives, and he felt so without a male role model and without structure and without the boundary enforcement, that he began to drift into a video game addiction that was so deep that he told me that he felt that he actually identified more as a character in the video games than he saw himself as a human being. So this is really an example of the need for boys to have these different parenting styles that dads, as a rule, tend to bring to parenting of a child versus moms. And both moms and dads' parenting styles are very important as a contribution. Moms tend to protect a lot. Dads tend to sort of encourage more risk-taking, encourage more teasing, encourage more roughhousing. Well, the culture has been terrible to dads around the issue of informing dads that, for example, roughhousing done in dad style tends to children being more empathetic. I mean, can you imagine a dad saying, I'd like to, roughhouse with my kids to help make them more empathetic? I mean, It's so counterintuitive. And what actually seems to have the impact on the kids is when if somebody ends up crying, like mom feared right from the beginning would happen, and dad says, okay, what you did is you stuck your elbow in your sister's eye. So if you do that again, we're going to stop the roughhousing. And then the children do some version of that again. They're too aggressive versus assertive. And dad says, you were too aggressive. I told you before that's if you do that, we'll stop the roughhousing. And then when the kids are warned and the kids do it a first time, dads tend to not repeat themselves. They tend to just stop the roughhousing. So the time after that dad says, if you can't be aggressive, you must be assertive. Here's what the difference is. Here's what's sticking your eye, making your brother or sister cry. If you don't think of your brother and sister's needs, you're going to lose what you want, the roughhousing. That's the beginning of postponed gratification. The kid is saying to itself, okay, last time I treated my brother or sister too rough and didn't consider their feelings and their fears, I ended up losing what I wanted. The roughhousing. So empathy occurs when you make it to the child's advantage to think of somebody else's feelings. When you just tell the child to think of your brother's or sister's feelings, and then when they don't do that, you just tend to repeat it, that moms tend to do that. Moms tend to agree 100%. They want the child to be empathetic. But when the child is not empathetic or is too aggressive, moms tend, as a rule, and sometimes this is reversed, moms tend to repeat, I told you not to be that way. Dads tend to just end the gift that they're giving them, end the bond that they're giving them. And that forces the children into thinking of others, to understanding the distinctions between being assertive and aggressive, and having postponed gratification. So the kids then go to sort of accomplish something that they really want to accomplish, being a musician or a basketball player or something like that, or doing homework. And the kids have that postponed gratification, to have the discipline to complete the homework or to achieve their dream. They then feel better about themselves in school, and from parents and brothers and sisters. And for guys who are 12 years old, 13, 14, 15 years of age, they start noticing very quickly that girls are very interested in winners. They're not at all interested in losers.
And it's been a little tough to get some of these messages out. Now, your book has been a great example. Some of the other people have had to have been examples of the word starting to get out. But I think there's still some pushback that when you start talking about the importance of fatherhood and fathers in a child's life, particularly a boy's life, some people said you're being anti-single mother.
First of all, I want to really verify that what you're saying is precisely true. As you know, I went out to interview both Republican presidential candidates about 8 years ago, and Democratic presidential candidates. And the presidential candidates like Andrew Yang and John Hickenlooper really said, wow, this really educates me. Andrew Yang was already well educated, and their campaign managers came up to me later and said, Dr. Ferrell, we can start talking about the importance of fathers, because a good part of our base is single mothers. And we don't want single mothers to be to feel like they're being criticized. And my response to that was, we need every single mother that I dated between marriages had one word aside from love that she used with me, and that word was overwhelmed. And the other word, the second most used word, was guilty. She was overwhelmed by having to handle all the work of raising the children, and then all the work of working outside in the workplace. And the guilty part was that she often felt guilty that she wasn't spending enough time with the children and doing as good a job with the children as she felt she could. And she wasn't doing as good a job in the workplace as she felt she could. And she felt overwhelmed and stressed by trying to do it all. My message is saying that moms, single moms, you deserve dads to participate equally in the child raising process, and to bring your different skill sets to the child raising process, because we know that the single biggest predictor of suicide is the father absence. The single biggest predictor of having a shorter life expectancy, as measured by telomeres at the age of 9.5, is the lack of father involvement. The single biggest predictor in more than 70 metrics of child happiness, success, health, healthy development includes father and mother involvement, and then checks and balances communication about the different ways that men and women tend to raise children. This is the solution to our children's happiness, in addition to laws being changed so that when there's a divorce, that children have equal opportunity to be both with their father and mother, rather than women having the right to children and men having to fight for children. And first of all, when I started doing the research for the boy crisis, I didn't see anything that was talking about how dads contribute differently to the child raising process. I mentioned the roughhousing example, a little while ago. Most mothers, they see the father starting to roughhouse and they go, oh my God, I know somebody's going to get hurt. And they're only about 99% likely to be right. But nobody explains the process that I explained before that leads to the empathy, the postponed gratification, the greater understanding of the difference between assertiveness and aggressiveness, and how that manifests in being able to get more friends in school. If you understand understand the difference between assertiveness and aggressiveness, more people will like you in school than if you go around being aggressive to everybody. And so you have more friends that develops a more positive spirit and less depression, less anxiety, less desire to withdraw into video games and so on. So so we as men have to. So I ended up, writing in the Boy Crisis book, many areas of, how dads tend to tease. When dads tend to tease with children at first, the children usually end up crying because they think that they're being criticized. And mom feels like, oh my God, you just made, Jimmy or Jane cry. That was, insensitive of you. And yet if you tease children too much, that can be damaging too. But not knowing how to be teased and how to be able to handle criticism through the modality of teasing, that oftentimes makes it go down sooner and smoother and not be so rough on the child, is a very important tool for children to have up to a point. And it's a perfect area of what I call checks and balances communication, of the mother being involved and trusting that a certain amount of teasing and the child crying can be a very helpful learning experience if also done with love. And yet at the same time, if it goes too far, then that can be overdone. And children taking risks, like, mothers and fathers. Fathers will often encourage camping. And then, if there's, let's say, a lake half a mile away, and it's during the daytime, the mother will tend to sort of like walk with the child to the lake. The father may let the child go considerably ahead. And if the father knows that if the child gets, quote, lost, they'll eventually find their way back. But that eventually find their way back scares the dickens out of the mother. And yet it does help the child learn how to sort of navigate and take responsibility for what risk-taking to occur. Same thing like with climbing a tree. Mom will tend to say, sweetie, I know you want to climb that tree, but maybe in a few years you can, but right now you're too young because you could fall out of the tree. Dads will say, well, you can climb the tree, but really be careful. And, when mom and dad do what I call checks and balance parenting, they can talk with each other about, okay, the child can climb the tree, but not beyond a certain point. And then you have to be under, dad, you have to be under that tree so that in case our son or daughter falls, you can cushion it. And by the way, let me have the cell phone. And so, so you don't get distracted. And so those types of negotiations allow the child the best opportunities to climb the tree. What's the value of climbing the tree? Very few dads say, when our children climb the tree, their IQ increases. How does their IQ increases? Their synapses start developing and firing in a way because the child has to assess what's safe, what's not safe, what's going to get me hurt. And so different types of out of the normal routine synapses start firing that increases children's IQ. And so we have the data for this, but the data was never being talked about and so dads didn't have the, even if dads read parenting magazines, which few do, or parenting books, they weren't able to say to moms, I'm not only encouraging the child to climb the tree because something inside of me feels it'd be fun for the child to climb the tree, but that the child's assessment of risks will increase. We want that child to be able to increase his or her assessment of risk while they're young and around us and can be semi-protected by us, rather than waiting until we're no longer there to protect them, and then they don't know how to handle risks in their real life. So this is the dialogue that needs to occur between dads and moms. When dads have the courage to speak up about what their positive contributions are, moms will hear that this is not just sort of like dad being irresponsible, but dad being responsible. The first thing you can do as a single mom to get dads involved is to understand what they contribute, why they're needed, and to let the biological dad know that you now understand what his value is. If your son is younger, there's very good data to show that if a boy is involved in Cub Scouts for 2 years and attends consistently, that his character will increase, be more positive on about 6 levels of measurement, such as integrity and loyalty and responsibility. things that every mother that I've ever met wants their children to have more of. You end up having your son have multiple mentors, and the deconstruction of masculinity is very well done because as boys achieve, let's say 5, they become a Star Scout, and they have more and more pride in themselves for doing that. Also, sports. Very few parents understand that there is what I call the liberal arts of sports, that boys and girls need to not only be involved with organized sports, which are very helpful for being able to have good mentorship and responsibility and knowing how to get along with other people, but also know how to do self-starting sports like gymnastics or tennis, where there's a greater emphasis on individual discipline, and also are encouraged to do pickup team sports, which are perfect preparations for being a great entrepreneur. If Mark and I meet and we've never met before, and you and I, Mark, negotiate, okay, should we play a full court or do we do half court? If you say to me, who can be chosen to work with us to make my side stronger versus your side stronger? Who on my side do I pass to that is just desire to always be the one to hog and shoot the shot versus who has only asked for the ball to be passed to him or her when they think they have a better shot. And so each of the sports has a purpose, but also keep an eye out for good, strong male role models for a son that doesn't have a male role model. Keep an eye, pressure your school and encourage your school to hire more male teachers. Not only more male teachers, but different types of males to be teachers. I'm more of a nurturer, connector type of male, but your son needs not just men like me, but also men who are more traditional. So no matter who your son is, they have a choice of different types of males to be mentored by. We have in junior high school, we have a son, and he's hearing in junior high school that the future is female, that masculinity is toxic, that the toxic masculinity has emanated from male privilege. We're all living in a patriarchy in which men have made the rules to benefit men at the expense of women. And he's beginning to feel, and I hear this in real life all the time. I'm speaking in a little while to a Montessori school, and the Montessori school teacher reached out to me after reading The Boy Crisis and said, I have to say, I'm guilty of all these things that you talk about, just like the things I just mentioned. I have been talking about all of those things to my classroom, and this is a junior high school Montessori, that registering males only for the draft at age 18 is not what I would like to have reversed and have my daughter do rather than my son. That men didn't make the rules to benefit men. They often made the rules to benefit women at the expense of their own lives, including that when children came along, they were willing to take jobs that they liked less, that paid more, so that children could have better schools to go to, like Montessori schools. Number 2 is making sure that we really pressure our legislators that after divorce, that the children have an equal amount of time with father and mother after divorce. If the must-dos, there's 4 must-dos after divorce. Must-do number, if you want children to grow up as almost as good as they would in an intact family. Number 1 is that equal amount of time with mom and dad. Number 2 is that children are not able to detect any bad mouthing from mom to dad or dad to mom. Mm-hmm. Number 3, that dad and mom live within about 20 minutes drive time from each other, so the children don't resent having to go to the other parent's home, but because they're missing a soccer practice or a birthday party of a friend. And number 4, that there be significant, consistent couples communication or relationship counseling that the parents engage in, not just when there's an emergency. So those are one set. The other big empathetic parents are oftentimes very sensitive to their children's needs, but they don't require their children to be sensitive to their needs and to their perspectives, and to make sure that the children understand the parents' perspectives until the parents don't feel distorted, don't feel that there's anything the children have missed. Mm-hmm. So empathy must be a two-way street, because every teacher will tell you that when she meets parents on a parent-teacher night, and that many of her very empathetic children don't have parents that are that empathetic. They have parents that require the children to also be empathetic. And the importance of couples communication is important, not just for the male, the dad and the mom, to have checks and balance parenting, but also for the dad and mom to teach every person in the family to be able to hear each other, so that family dinner night becomes a place where everyone feels safe, not just some of the children feel safe.
Thoughts on helping boys to recognize their strengths or good personality traits?
The first is see what is unique about your child. Everybody, historically speaking, boys had two senses of purpose: die in war and risk your life in the workplace to accomplish a lot. Now, for the first time in human history, we can say what is unique about our child's, where are our child's gifts? Are they singing? Are they playing basketball? Are they being a scholar, etc.? Second, once your child's gifts are identified with and your child is inspired by that gift, working to give that child postponed gratification, and which comes from boundary enforcement, making sure that if you're volunteering, for example, to take your child to a gymnastics practice and give your child a special tutor to become really top-notch in his or her field, that child then doesn't just take those gifts that you give and not focus on accomplishing the ends and the dreams that child wants to create. Understand that every gift, if it's being able to be manifested as that unique gift of that child, is likely to be very fulfilling for the child. And the more fulfilling the work, the less likely it is to pay well. And so in order for your child to be able to do fulfilling work as an occupation, like being an artist or a writer, we hear words like starving artist for a reason, then that child has to have discipline to be at the top of the field.
So excited to introduce our first keynote speaker, because there's a professional and personal connection. Dr. Gurian, I first met Dr. Gurian in 2015. I knew that he was an author of 32 books. Well, at the time it wasn't 32, but it was 32 books. And I'm a kid that grew up as a migrant worker. To know that I would have a chance to stand or sit beside a gentleman that has accomplished as much as he has, and he would make time for me, was something that's phenomenal. So I'm so pleased to call this gentleman a friend, a great friend, a person that's in the VIP section on the cell phone, and hopefully I'm in his as well. Dr. Michael Gurian, please bless us with your words, my brother from another mother.
Oh, hold on. So I've been really, really invested in this for quite a long time. And of course, as Troy said, I do girls' work, and it's child development, right? And it's the rascally things you did. So one guy looked back, and he remembered when he was 13, there were 5 of them. He and his 4 friends, they really loved each other. They really cared about each other. So they weren't enemies or anything. They really, were friends. And they like to go down into a basement. They like to turn the light off and make it completely and utterly dark. And then they like to throw metal pointed darts at each other. So these are not plastic darts or anything. They're metal pointed darts. So they are gonna hurt. And these are guys that love each other. So they would do that. They would throw the darts at each other, and they're throwing darts. And then, at a certain point, someone would go, ow! Ah. So they turn the light back on. They look, they see a guy, one of the boys, with a dart dangling right here, cheek right below his eye. Sons, who did blank. And I've probably heard, in telling this story over the last, say, 20 years, I've just heard some of the most amazing things that boys do that even went beyond what I thought. And they will include, playing laser tag, shooting bottle rockets at each other, what my brother and I did is BB guns, shooting BB guns at each other, which, by the way, are really painful, or the bottle rocket, or just a ball, just dodgeball, just throwing a ball at someone, etc. So there's going to be an object moving through space. That's number one. Number two, there's going to be aggression in the game. There's going to be aggression in the game, not violence, because by definition that I'll work with you in this talk today, aggression and violence are not the same thing. Aggression is healthy, violence is not healthy. And number three, there's going to be danger. So there's going to be some possible danger, some potential wounding, or what we would just call pain. We've proven this, constantly over the last 25 years, that if you nurture the nature, you have more success. And I'll, of course, develop that today. And 86% of white matter regions involved in intellectual performance, which is going to be school, thinking, any of that. For women, are in the brain's frontal lobes. Right? So this is where executive decision-making happens. This is where words are happening and word-to-feeling connections, and 0% for males. And when we circle back to this, I'll show you scans that show you this even further. So women and girls are doing a lot up here, right? The majority of this stuff they are doing up here, where executive decision-making is, where impulse control is, where words are, right? And boys and men, we're doing things further back. So we're not here for a lot of what we do, right? We're further back. So the gray matter driving male intellectual performance is distributed more throughout the brain, because it's a really big deal. When we do systems analysis, and if I use schools as an example, I'll use schools and counseling systems, because those are the two that I'm educated and trained in and work in, right? I'm a counselor, mental health therapist, and then also educator. So in those two systems, where I and many of you will have gotten our training or will simply be working, we are tending toward a use your words format, right? We're tending to saying to kids, use your words. Don't do that, use your words. And think 3-year-olds, think 4-year-olds, boys, girls, think preschools, keep going, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, all the way through, right? We're taught to say to kids, use your words. The system was wrong. The system didn't fit their brains. So if you have a brain that's going to tend toward throwing darts to show that he loves the other guy, or jumping on the other guy and wrestling with him, or throwing it, like if you're a dad, throwing your child up and down to show how much you love your child. If you have a brain that's going to do that, it's not going to be as good at sitting. And if you have a brain that is not operating, for the most part, out of the frontal, but is operating in other brain centers further back and lower down, and then sometimes moving stuff to the frontal, well, then sitting for 50 minutes and being asked, how do you feel, is not going to work. And what you're going to sitting and how do you feel, sit here and tell me, the guy says to mom or to spouse or partner, says, she doesn't understand me, or he doesn't understand me, or that's not for me, or something like that, and a little angrily, that's wasting my time. But if we just think about just what I've told you just right now, just that, and you redo your therapy office, you redo your counseling techniques, you redo anything in which you're relating to boys and men to try to elicit feeling and emotion, you redo it and you say, what if we change the system? So let's see what we get out of these guys. So what I did is from then on, this started about 25 years ago, I offer that the boys and girls, women and men, anyone, will take a walk with me for the first 15 minutes. And some women enjoy that, and a few adolescent girls enjoy that. But it's mainly the boys and the men who are looking for that. And they're like, great, okay, this person understands me. That's what's happening for them subconsciously. This person understands me. This counselor understands me. This educator understands me, because we are moving. And so my cerebellum. So boys are very cerebellum dependent. We really need the cerebellum, which is back at the back of the brain. We really need that to be active to get more of our brains active. Not at every moment. We can sit still, of course, but quite often we need that cerebellum active, blood flow going through the cerebellum so that the rest of the brain can be active. And so cerebellum is active, we're moving 10, 15 minutes, and we're shoulder to shoulder. I'm not looking them in the eye going, how do you feel? Right? We're shoulder to shoulder. It's more comfortable. We're walking. And now all sorts of stuff is going to happen. And then when we go back into the office, now we sit. Fair enough, we sit, that's the modality. But now I'm throwing we either have a talking stick or I'm throwing something back and forth. So when he talks, and it could be a she, but remember, most girls and women don't need this or want this. They already have. Most of their work is already being done as girls and women in this frontal lobe, which is the object. It's an object moving through space. It stimulates much more of his brain, and he's going to be able to speak more words and connect more words to feelings. They got to get squeeze balls. They got to be able to move around so the cerebellum is active, so that the spatial mechanicals are active. We got to do more graphic organizers so that they get more visual graphic to help them with organization. Because then what we're doing is we're saying we can get the male brain just as well activated in education and counseling, for instance. But our bias, without our realizing it, is we're thinking of systems from the point of view of female brain and what works for female brain. And we don't realize they're not going to have it as much. But when they do these things that they do, like rough and tumble play and throwing darts and bottle rockets and all this stuff, they are having an emotive experience. And it is an emotive experience of love and bonding. It's the exact social emotional experience we want for them. But they're getting it in a different way. And you want to talk to them more about what they're feeling. Do a task while talking to them. Do a task while talking to them. But we got to go deeper. And if we don't go deeper, we will continue to abandon our boys. And we are living in an era in which we are abandoning our boys. The boys that are going to get to the top are going to get to the top. Their gene expression is great. No matter what happens, those guys are getting to the top. But, we have tens of millions who are not, you're not going to see them on TV unless they do something bad. They're not going to get to the top. They may not even succeed at all. So we are really abandoning them. And we've got defective. We need to kind of get rid of them. Men are defective. We don't want boys to become men because that's defective. And that's misandric and misophobic. We're scared of males. We convince people to be scared of males, and of course, people who have been hurt by a male will be scared of males. I'm a sexual abuse survivor, and that's what the Stone Boys is about. I definitely was scared of males for a while. I had to really figure my way through that. I was in therapy for quite a long time, and so I get what fear of males is. I get what anger toward males is. But we have to also see through it. Because not all males are there. We've created this defective stereotype of males, which is really, I think, destroying us. Child's in the high chair and the child drops the spoon. We're eating dinner, the child drops the spoon. And we go like, oh, I'll bend down and pick up the spoon, right? It's easy. I don't have to undo the high chair. I, the adult, will pick up the spoon, put the spoon back on the little tray so the child can keep eating. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. I've done it, obviously I must have done it 1,000 times in raising my daughters. But like with boys, what I'm saying is I would rather that from very young, that this boy was doing stuff that was connected to purpose too. Connected to purpose. So I'll pull out the high chair because he doesn't have the dexterity yet to pull out the high chair. But then he needs to climb down. He's, let's say, 2 years old. He needs to climb down out of that chair. He needs to pick up his spoon, and he comes back up into his chair. I put the tray back, right? He's eating again. So that's an independent activity. It teaches that, but it also is a doing. It's a doing. Depression tends to be covert. Covert meaning usually it's hidden behind substance abuse or substance overuse, as we say. It's also hidden behind other activities. It's hidden behind isolation. It's hidden behind something else. They don't tell us they're depressed, right? They're not as word oriented. They don't connect as many words to feelings at their baseline. So they're depressed, but we don't understand that they're depressed. We are not trained in covert depression. The underlying causes are environmental neurotoxins, like that are in plastics that are that affect our gene expression. They're in foods, they're in fertilizers, they're in pesticide. These environmental neurotoxins are creating mutations, and those mutations are on sperm and egg. So when mom and dad are conceiving, sperm and egg, and then they're so they already come in. And so that's the primary reason we're seeing so many more brain disorders and severe brain disorders in children in the last 20 to 30 years than we ever saw. But also they can affect the growing child and the gene expression of the growing child, including what we would call mental health. The second thing is trauma. That's a cause. And then under-attachment. And we have a significant under-attachment issue in our, I'll say the US, but many cultures have it. It's an under-attachment to a three-family system. So in other words, to a tribe that's raising kids, so that what we have is a boy who is attached really only to one person, generally a single mom. And she's doing everything she can. It's just no attack on a single mom. She's doing everything. But for brain development, that's really harsh for males especially, because we don't automatically use the frontal. We really need the three-family system to help us through late childhood and adolescence into emerging adulthood to build the connections, to build the connection to the frontal. And a person that we really, really especially need also after mom, we need mom, absolutely, is dad. We especially need dad, because dads help us close connections. Under attachment, lack of attachment, not only in the three-family system, but to father and male role models, that is a significant trauma on the male brain. So if you have a depressed male, look at this systemically. You know a depressed male, and he is going to a therapist who says, sit down and tell me how you're feeling for 50 minutes, right? I'm going to trail all this together now. Well, he's probably going to leave that therapist. The system is not understanding how to treat his male depression. If he goes to a school that is wonderful, I mean, everyone always is doing their best, so it's no attack on everyone, but the school has never learned about male brain, doesn't really know about it, has not inculcated it systemically. They're not going to understand that these 10 boys, these 20 boys are depressed. They just won't, right? And then they won't have the system set up to help treat them, these boys who are depressed. And those boys will gradually, they'll drop out, or they'll go somewhere else. They'll just play video games for hours per day because it stimulates them, and they'll get more depressed, or they'll start using drugs and they'll get a high from it, but actually their brain is getting more depressed, and a few years later they'll do something violent. I want to say my last big theme is tech, and then I'm going to show you a bunch of scans. So tech is huge. We're losing a lot of boys because they're spending much too much time in front of screens, and I would say the boys we're losing go into the millions. No way to really know. Causation is difficult, but to identify. But my general rules for anyone listening, just to cut to the chase are, and while you're reading this stuff, which is all out there for you, is no video games on school nights. If you have a boy who's in school and you want him to succeed in school, then no video games on school nights. Save that for the weekend. No devices. And a lot of this, by the way, is going to serve girls as well. No devices for an hour before bed. No devices for an hour before bed. And by the way, this is great for us adults. No devices for an hour before bed. The only exception might be a Kindle. If he won't read, hardcover books that are physical, might be a Kindle, but it can't be connected to anything else. No internet, nothing else. It can only be a Kindle. It can't be an iPad connected to everything else. And I myself, just for brain development and for the development of the visual form area in the brain, the visual word form area, I would love him to actually be reading the physical book, because there's something kinesthetic that also stimulates more of his brain. Kindle is so passive. But if you're going to have him ready to read a Kindle, okay, only that, nothing else for an hour before bed. Do a detailed analysis of how much device use he has and fit it to his age. So Saving Our Sons for boys, Minds of Girls for girls, I divide it up for ages, birth to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6. And I give the brain research and how much screen time is good for each of those ages for healthy brain development. So I can't give it all now, and I won't, but Saving Our Sons, Minds of Girls gives it to you. I will give a few examples though. No smartphone. I beg you, no smartphone until he's 13. No smartphone until he's 13. Once we give him the smartphone, he will spend 2 to 3 hours. There will be no way to curtail it. He'll be 2 to 3 hours looking at that smartphone. And then he's doing 3 hours of screen to school because they're using iPads, whatever they're using, right? And then he's going to go do other stuff with screens like texting, et cetera, or TV or watching movies. So he's going to end up at 10 years old, and if you haven't played video games, he's going to end up 10 hours a day at 10 years old. That is absolutely dangerous for his brain development. We do not want that. So if he's living in your house, everything in the house that is owned by you. So he does not, you will give him basic privacy. Of course you will. But if you need to go into his browser history because you suspect he's using substances or you suspect he's using porn, that is your right. And as you raise him, you just keep telling him that. You know what? Do not expect because you're 13, I'm not going to go into your browser history. Sorry, if I'm worried about you, I'm your parent. I got to protect you. I'm going into your browsing history. Now, of course, he's going to set up a dummy account and do all sorts of things to hide it from you. And you have to be smarter than that. And then you have to go into those too. And that is the life we are living right now. But it's really, I put down here why it's a dopamine system issue. So screen time and all, what it is doing is affecting the way the dopamine system works. Dopamine is the reward chemical, and that reward chemical is part of how the brain closes circuits. So if the brain, and you need those circuits closed, especially circuits that are going to move his brain function more toward frontal, temporal, top of the brain, you want those circuits to be closing and those synapses to be working and that brain development to be happening throughout that first 20 years of life. You want that so that he can mature, so that he can become an adult, so that he can become a good man. Whatever is the terminology you use, you need that. You want that. And the dopamine is high reward or low reward, and what you want is appropriate reward so that the brain will close the circuits. And no, we didn't have issues like this 50 years ago because we didn't have kids given screens at 2 years old. Because we're talking about dopamine and brain development, you ought to go into this thinking probably my kid won't be fine, because we're talking about a baseline for brain development, which is dopamine use. And so there will be a potential effect if the kid is 5 to 10 hours on the screen and he's 10 years old. 10 to 20 minutes just at your baseline to keep their brains awake, because if you don't practice male-friendly, boy-friendly education, and boys get in a boredom state, this is what happens to their brains. They go almost completely blank. And the female brain is still functioning beautifully, just still taking notes, still hearing the directions, still thinking about 3 other things she needs to do, produce the paper you want. And males get around 70% of the D's and F's in our classrooms in the US and the Western world. Political reasons for that in academia. So we don't get a course in this. So we walk in and we create classrooms and counseling sessions and other environments, and we just never saw that this is going to happen, and that this is going to happen to brains of all races and of all cultures, that the male brain, this is linked to the Y chromosome and the way the brain's formatted, the male brain's going to go to a rest state when it gets bored. And I'm going to give an example that's going to show this. For males, when they're under stress, testosterone goes up, and males are already at a higher baseline for testosterone anyway. So while males can sit and chat at the dinner table, of course, males are also, right, higher aggression. They're looking for other ways to do it, like throwing darts. So let me give an example of what I mean by this. And then you'll see these terms: aggression and empathy nurturance. Aggression and empathy nurturance. They're key terms. They're bi-strategic nurturing, and we need them. We need both strategies, multiple people giving kids both strategies if we want them to be resilient, mature adults and to thrive in our systems. So the example I'll give is, it's in The Wonder of Boys, actually. It happened right around my block. The boys and the girls were playing street hockey. They were between 10 and 12. They had their net set up. They're going back and forth on the rollerblades, playing street hockey. And this 11-year-old boy falls down, right? He skins his knee. And this girl, similar age girl from the other team, right, comes right over there and says, "Are you okay? Do you need a Band-Aid? Are you okay?" She stops playing the game. She stops the aggression. and she does what we would call direct empathy nurturance. She's directly empathic with him right now. I'm right there with you. And what happens is that her insula, which creates mirror neurons, her insula fills up immediately with mirror neurons, and she sees his pain, and she wants to help. And it creates this inner stress, which also increases her oxytocin. So she's willing to stop the game. Heck with the game. I'm going to come help you. Oxytocin, bonding chemical, mirror neurons. Okay. There's a boy who comes across, and I have to do it with my finger. He brings a skateboard across, and he looks down at his colleague, his teammate, and he sees the skinned knee, but he sees that the kid, he's okay. So he says, hey, get up, we need you. Get up, we need you. And he goes past. But just being more female-centric in the way we assess things, we will think that what the boy said was bad and what the girl said was good. Because what we will think is that empathy nurturance is what nurturing is. Nurturing is that direct empathy. That's how you nurture. You have mirror neurons that get all, I'm into it. I see your pain. I want to help you. I want to hear how you feel. And then I want to get you a Band-Aid and help you, right? Which is beautiful. Humanity would not have survived if we did not have empathy nurturance. So it's a beautiful thing. But I would make the argument that humanity also survives because we have aggression nurturance. And what the boy said was not the stereotype thing that I don't think any of us like, which is boys don't cry, stop crying, that you're a wuss, you're a pussy, right? He doesn't say that. He's actually a really good empathy nurturance leader, a really good aggression nurturance leader. He says, get up, we need you. Get up, we need you. That is really good nurturing. So he puts the boy back into the system, and he says, you're needed in the system. You're needed in the system. And that is what I'm going to end my talk time with you and move to questions. That is what we need more of with boys. And it doesn't harm girls at all. But it fits the male brain because the male insula doesn't fill up with as many mirror neurons as the female at the baseline. We get hit with more testosterone when we get under stress. And the testosterone cells actually kill off the mirror neurons. So we're going to tend much more toward aggression nurturance, not every moment of every day, but we're going to tend more toward it. And I say, let's use it. Let's have an equality of empathy nurturance and aggression nurturance and do citizen science. And you're going to see kids are going to be more resilient. We're not going to intervene as much with them. They're going to be more resilient. They're going to be healthier and happier. And that will be true of both boys and girls and everyone on the spectrum.
Wow, Dr. Gurian, I have to tell you, I've been around you for 7 years, and every time I hear you, there's something else. I mean,
attachment and bonding. That wasn't bad behavior. That's touch attachment. That's good stuff. Oh yeah, that's fine. We'll do that. That's touch attachment. Or the karate kicks on the playground. Oh, wait a minute. That's rough and tumble play, which we know is really good for circuitry development in the brain, right? So the system then changes and reassesses every one of the things in its bylaws, and then cuts out the rules that are not appropriate for aggression nurturance and for resilience building and all this, but keeps the rules that say you can't bully.
And you cut out the reality of parenting 4 boys over 20 plus years, which is, as everybody here can imagine, it's messy. It's not all great guys. There is the screaming and crying and bickering, and we haven't had any darts in the face, but we have had other incidences that have led us to ERs in the past. So that's the reality of raising boys. I didn't know all of that, though. 25 years ago, when my first son was born, nearly 25 years ago when he was born, I did not know that I would be raising boys in a world that misunderstands males. I didn't know that the world misunderstood males. I started realizing that there was a lot that I didn't know about boys. And it's about that time that I discovered the work of Michael Gurian, which helped me tremendously, because I realized that my boys were not the only ones struggling in a system that didn't seem to see them or understand them 2 or 3 years ago, because you try getting 4 boys together in the same picture at this age. The world misunderstands male vulnerability. And this is one of those things where there's this idea, and it's not entirely misplaced. There's idea that men and boys are strong, and they are. But that doesn't mean that they're not susceptible to stress. That doesn't mean that they can't have issues with things like body image. That doesn't mean that physical and emotional stressors don't harm them as well. And yet just last week, I ran across not one, but 2 articles that said, contrary to conventional wisdom, and the one was, boys can also get eating disorders. And the other was, contrary to conventional wisdom, teenage boys can also have low self-esteem. Here's everybody, okay? For a period of time, I had my dining room table pushed up against one wall so that there's a very clear path from the living room through the dining room to the Nerf basketball hoop mounted on the doorway by the kitchen. That kind of hands-on mechanical learning in grade school. They don't do it in elementary school. They don't do it in junior high. We carved out a space in our garage, and I prioritized his time in the garage to tinker equally, if not more important than I cared about his homework, because I saw that this was important to him. Create safe spaces for boys to be who they are. Too. As you create a space for boys to be who they are, guess what? Their friends will gravitate over too. Yes, this may mean more noise, mess, and chaos, but you're getting to know the people that your guys are hanging out with, which becomes absolutely invaluable as time goes on. Healthy risk-taking is good for our boys. It is how they learn about themselves, their capability, their resilience. I have noticed in my guys and in others, so often boys find the limit by blowing past it. It's almost like they have to go past it and find the consequence, whether that is pain or suffering or a disagreement with friends, before they go, oh yeah, okay, that was too far. Next time I won't do that. Or they come up with a better plan if we're talking about something like building a bike jump to go over a picnic table. Totally random example. Sure, totally random. And when we say, basically, sit down, listen, learn this, and in 12 years or so, when you graduate school, now you can do things, you're going to lose them. They can contribute right now. I don't care if we are talking about your 2-year-old. He can contribute to the family. 12-year-old can contribute to the community. A 6-year-old can contribute. But it will take some advocacy and education on your part to help make those connections. Model and teach emotional intelligence and healthy relationships. Yeah, so that's everything. I hear so many people get frustrated. We want boys who are respectful. We want men who are respectful. Yes, we do. We need to model that. We, the grown-ups, we have to work on our stuff. We have to work on our emotional control. We have to work on our relationships with others. In a very boy-specific way here, let's recognize that boys learn a lot of this through things like roughhousing and rough and tumble play. So when we put the kibosh on those activities, we are hindering their opportunities to learn about things like boundaries, personal space, consent. You don't have to use those words when your kids are 4 or 6. You can, you don't have to, but you have to recognize that those male ways of interacting are valid, are acceptable, and you can make the space for boys to develop those skills in those ways. I know that Dr. Gurian touched on this in the beginning also, but there tends to be, especially among women, moms, teachers, we feel very uncomfortable around angry males. Even when the males are little, when they're 4, but especially when they're 14, when they're 16, and they become bigger than us. And in many cases, it is because we have experienced or know somebody who has experienced harm at the hands of a male, perhaps an angry male. Work on that. Do what you can to heal that harm, but also to rewire your brain, take a breath, and recognize that this upset boy is not necessarily a threat. This upset boy is a human who needs help and who needs support. And there's research that shows that premature physical or emotional separation from caregivers is more damaging for boys than it is for girls. One strategy that I learned from a New York Times article and psychologist Lisa D'Amore, it's called the potted plant parenting theory. And this is basically, as your kids get older, sometimes just be the potted plant in the room. So I would make it a point to sort of hang out where they were. I might be on my phone or reading a book or doing something. They knew I was there. They could seek me out if they needed or wanted to, or not.